Strong Dads wants to thank 4Speed on 50 for sponsoring today's show. If you like classic cars, great food, and a taste of Americana, you have to visit 4Speed on 50's Diner, located on Route 50 in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Stop in today for a meal and an experience you won't soon forget at 4Speed on 50's Diner. Welcome to Strong Dads. This is Merle Hutchinson and Carl Andre bringing you another great show. I'm glad this is second take. We got second take.
Yeah, we won't show them the first one, right?
Yeah. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Holiday season's a little tough for me. Always been historically a tough time. So relative to that, I'm doing pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, well, we got a lot going on just with kids coming in, with the grandbabies coming in, so lots going on. And as I said in our last show with my wife, Linda, I would be lying if I told you I did a lot of prep work for all of that Christmas stuff. So, but I'm there for moral support, right?
Me too. Me too. I am so blessed to have the wife that I have, because if I can do a lot of things in life, but nothing gives me an anxiety trip faster than going to the mall or shopping for Christmas.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at it.
Yeah, or wrapping presents.
I'll wrap presents. I would crawl on nails.
Yeah.
Whatever. Just keep from. I'm just like a deer in the headlights when it comes to shopping for people.
Yeah. Well, that leads maybe a little bit into what we're going to talk about today. So I think this is an interesting subject, and you and I talk a lot, without getting too far off in the weeds about this self-help stuff, right?
Yeah.
And how do we improve our life? And I've always thought, like, every day I do look to make my life better. Like, I don't wake up going, I hope I have a bad day today, right? Or I want to intentionally do stuff to destruct myself or whatever. So I always am looking for ways to improve the quality of life. And I think some of that has to do with how we're thinking.
Absolutely.
Like, are we thinking towards the positive? Are we thinking about positive things? Are we an optimist? Or are we the Debbie Downer, right? Yeah. Like, well, it's never going to work out. Well, it's, this is, another same blank, different day, right?
I call that Groundhog Day syndrome, somewhat, where you get into the loop, but on top of that, then you're expecting just the residue of bad that hangs over all that.
Yeah. And I've fallen into it. I've definitely fallen into that. One of our shows was, if you're jumping into a big project, just nothing's easy, nothing's cheap. Think about the worst, and then it's going to be better.
But I thought about this too, and I think, in fairness, we're wired this way. Yeah. I mean, you never get up in the morning and the stock market's gone up 25%.
Right.
It drops 25 or 50% easily. There's never a tornado spinning backwards that puts trailers back,
in place,
or builds mansions for you. So there, from the time where we take our first breath, death is pursuing us. It's such a tenuous thing. So some of this is. It's a human nature to try to be prepared for the worst, but it's when we expect the worst all the time that we really get into trouble.
Yeah, it is. It's a part of the survival training of your brain.
Right.
You're right. And so, but it is like, can it get out of whack, right? Like, constantly over thinking those things until really there's tornadoes every day now. So, well, hey, before we go too much further into that, let me thank our sponsors. I want to thank Quality Auto Mart, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and 4Speed on 50 Diner. So thanks to those guys and just the support that they give us all year. This year they've been with us. We greatly appreciate that. If you're doing any business with them and you listen to this show, just tell them thanks. You've recognized that we mentioned them on the show. They just appreciate that. So we thank you for that. We also just want to thank all of our listeners throughout the course of the year and sharing the show. That's been a great help. So as I've said, this week has already happened twice to me. Two different separate guys have come in and said, hey, I've been listening to the show.
That's great.
And if, as I've said before, that means more to us than anything, because they're coming in and they're thinking about whatever it is. So it's an active listen versus just passively, and then they go to the next podcast.
Well, you know, I said at the beginning of this, I don't know that this will ever explode or anything like that, but if we just change one life, it's worth it.
It's good stuff. So, all right.
How about if I jump in here?
Jump in. Do your thing.
You know, one of the things you mentioned when we were looking at the framework on this is this Pygmalion effect. And I think it'd be good for you to elaborate on that, especially a lot of people listening to this may never have encountered that. Mm-hmm. Do you mind?
Yeah. So this is kind of, I mean, there's been lots of different research projects on this where they've done it over the years. And the idea here is, if you took a bunch of bright kids, right, and they already had the history of being bright or having higher IQs, and you put them in a class, and the teacher treated them as if they were not bright,
which is, from my study, is called the Golem effect.
Yeah.
Did you? I don't know if you ran across that.
I ran across that word.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is the inverse of the Pygmalion that we're talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so, you know, you could think of them and talk to them if it's worse. Right?
Yeah.
And the other side of that is you could take kids who perform normally average or maybe subpar, and you could boost them with, oh, you guys are the best. You're the brightest. Like, it's unbelievable how well you do. That when they are given a standardized test, they will rise to that occasion. Like, in other words, the kids who are average will score better, even though they didn't get smarter, so to speak. They didn't study more or anything like that. And the kids who are not, are typically doing better in the academics, they will come in lower. So the idea there is, you know, you kind of get what you're planting the seed of. It's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy sort of thing. In this case, the teacher is the one running it.
It's a teacher, maybe the influence on the teacher, their thought that the student is a better student than the student really is.
Yes.
But they're pouring more attention into and have a stronger belief in the person than maybe that person has, and you see this effect.
Yeah. Well, and I don't even think this is debatable in terms of whether it's if it's true. We know all the time that when you talk about athletes, if they've been winning, you'll hear somewhere in the line, "Coach believed in us." Yeah. Coach believed in us. You know, Coach always talked to us as if we can do this. Yeah. And I just think that whole attitude and action that is taken then from that thought does mean something.
Somebody, you know, and I thought about this, and I didn't tell you this earlier when we were talking about this show. We ran into a project where I work, and it was assigned to me because I was the go-to guy. I've talked about that in previous shows. And I went into the owner and I said, "Tom, I don't believe I can do this. I just don't believe I can do this." It was beyond comprehension for me to be able to pull off what he was asking. And he just looked at me and says, "I think you can. And I want you to try your best."
Yeah.
And I reiterated, I said, "Tom, I don't see how. This is beyond my capability." I was trying to save him the embarrassment because we never didn't deliver if we took a job and we were always on time. And I'm looking at this going, this is well beyond anything I ever attempted.
Yeah.
And I made it clear to him. And then I felt I was free. It didn't mean I was going to scrap it or anything like that. It just like, okay, I've made him aware. But the fact that he believed in me gave me a big sense deep down that maybe there's something he sees in me that I don't even see. And I pulled it off. I mean, it was tedious, but I pulled it off. And I look back on that and I think, how many times have I, limited myself from that standpoint?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, just the idea that he says that to you, like, no, you can do this. You also want to please him, right?
Oh, I always wanted to.
You want to please him. You're like, no, like he believes in me, so I do want to do this for him. So I think there's just that whole thing that goes on. Carl, you just made my brain jump a little bit, and I have a confession here concerning our son Zach. Okay, and so Zach, if you're listening, Zach, you referred to Zach. He's a sleeper. You use that phrase. Yeah. And Zach had the blessing and the curse of being raised behind a child who was an overachiever, his older brother. Okay?
Got quite awake.
Yeah, yeah. And it was just like raising those two in that setting was actually hard because you're like, you don't want that kid to have to live in the shadow of a kid who's an overachiever like his brother was. And so, and I don't know, I think it was part of Zach's personality or whatever. He was always very quiet.
Yeah.
And he would not show his cards. Right? Like never showy, never, and you never really knew how good he could do at anything. And so Lynn and I were always very tentative about what he was capable of. And so that's my confession. We were very tentative about it.
You were great parents. But I remember distinctly when I was up staying in your beams up there. I was up on the scaffold thing up there.
Yeah.
And I'm watching him out through the front door. And that's when I realized that there's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
And that's why I said he was a sleeper, because I could see the way he was doing things and the way he was just acting, and watching him, he had far more going on than he was more than, there's an old saying, I think you should always have a little bit of stuff in the tank.
Yeah.
That you hold back a little bit so that you've got that reserve and you can smoke somebody at the right time. They just like, where'd that come from, kind of thing. He just struck me that way, and I remember watching him. So it was there. I think it was there for quite a while, but you probably because you were so focused on the comparison.
Yeah, like it was just so outward with his brother.
Yeah.
So it was easy to see,
and
it was so much harder to see. And I think from the parenting perspective, we became a little bit blinded to seeing the potential. We never thought he was always a great kid. All of that. So and it wasn't until you said he was a sleeper, and then he first started in wrestling, was sleeper, and I've shared that story. And all of a sudden he just started kicking tail, and then he did it in academics, and then he does it. He goes a full ride military scholarship, and then he becomes a Navy SEAL. And I'm just like, Carl saw something in him that I wish I would have seen. Because I would have, I think, approached him a little differently in parenting.
He did the right. He came out great.
He did, but I mean, again, it was just that little hesitation of, I wonder if he's going to make it, versus your boss said, oh, no, you can do this. So
he's a jet engine. You look at a jet engine, you got to put a whole lot of RPMs into it before you see any motion. I think that was and then others are like V8s, it's an instant torque kind of thing. So it worked out.
And it's part of personality, right? It's part of how they're wired like that. So anyway, with all that being said, we talked about the Pygmalion effect.
Let's back up though. Zach, you can send your thank you.
This all goes to Caro. It is around Christmas, Zach. Maybe you should say a thank you. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So then with that idea, there are certain things that, as we're talking to you strong dads out there, you men, there's certain things that we see with guys of, you've heard the phrase self-fulfilling prophecies, and that's usually considered in a dark light, self-sabotage.
Oh, I've been guilty of that a lot.
Yeah, like, I don't know how our heads get spun up. We're on the right track, and then we spin our head up in a way that we take ourselves off the track,
I think, what you talked about earlier, I don't know where you're going right now, but I think once you develop a mindset of how the world looks and you filter everything through that, that's critical.
Yeah.
And you can really, the self-sabotage comes from, you believe that people are out to get you, or that they have less than good desires, or that they're cheats, liars, steals, whatever it is that you're starting to project, it starts to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and thereby you self-sabotage, because of these false beliefs. So it's a cascading effect.
Yeah, and so the idea here, guys, is what you think about is what actually starts to become part of your life. It starts to become a reality just because you put it into function, right? It's like, well, I thought about it long enough, it actually started to happen.
Yeah.
Well, if that's true, then we could take that in both directions, right?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah, I could think about the good or how strong I am or whatever, and move towards the positive. And we talked earlier about, and I could be a winner. or I could be a loser.
Right.
And so.
And we're going to define what a winner is here in a little bit.
Yeah. So anyway, with that being said, I think one of the things we'd ask you guys as you're listening to this is, what might be your default mindset? And I think we all have defaults.
Oh, yeah.
You know, just like our son Zach had a default behavior pattern, right? But we all have this default where whether we tend to lean to the negative, the pessimist, or we see nothing but rainbows and butterflies and everything's going to work out great.
Naive with some people, you're just naive, you know.
Yeah. So we have that, but part of our show today is, well, is this just the way it is? Are we resigned to the idea that, are we predestined to be either the winner or the loser, right? I'll just say personally, I don't believe that. I don't believe that we're predestined for that garbage.
So many junctures in your life, you are faced with a decision. And how you decide that is what's going to determine the future.
Yeah.
And with this negative mindset to start with, it might steer you into the improper lane or the proper lane, but these habits that you develop over time. And I said this, as you get older, especially at this age, it takes a lot of courage to age well. And if you're young, you're not going to understand that. You have choices at each one of these stages, especially now. You think by this time you'd have it all together and everything would be good, but then your body starts to fail, your mind starts to fail. So if you're back here starting this habit in your 20s of this negative thoughts, when these other decisions come up, you're going to choose a negative reaction, most likely because of the habit.
Yeah. I feel like maybe now might be a good time to talk about a definition of winner.
Yeah.
Because I want to go through, okay, so how do we give guys a pathway, some advice on how to take thoughts captive and move things in the right direction.
Right.
But what's the right direction? In other words, what's winning? What's a winner? And I think we should, just because we're a faith-based group here and we really believe that that's the reason for what we do here, could you want to define what a winner is?
I'll take it on. I think, as I thought about this, and I want to be really clear, the Bible warns us about being out of this world.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of worldly influences, and we see this with so many different things. You've got to have, there's a toothpaste commercial. If you use this, ding, you're going to get the girls and, the mansion and all that simply because you brush your teeth with a certain toothpaste. Women have so much pressure put on them to be attractive, So there are a lot of outside influences, and when we think of winners, generally it's the mansion, it's the person that's making things happen and everything like that. For me today, a winner is somebody that is what God intended them to be and is doing what God intended them to do. And I said this before the show, when we look in the Bible and we're studying Samuel in our group right now. And we're looking at David, and if you go back in the Bible, there are a lot of the begats, who begat, and we're going to come down to the prophecy of David. Those people just had one little name.
Yeah.
But their role in the great fulfillment of that prophecy is huge.
Yeah.
So to me, a winner today is somebody who is what God intended to be and doing what God intended them to do. It may be an ordinary life, and I think we don't give enough credit to that. You think you've got to be out changing the world and doing all these things. If you're a great husband, if you're a great father, if you're a provider, if you are leaving the world, in your little world at least, a better place than you found it.
Yeah.
If you are living within your means and hopefully leaving a inheritance to your children's children. Not that you have to amass a lot of money, but the way we generally define winner is, they got the high-powered job, they've got the flashy car, they've got the position, they've got all these things. I think that's dangerous. Maybe God intended that for you. That might be your gift. It might be your gift to make lots of money and give it. It may be your gift to start corporations. It may, but I think so often when we define winners, we tend to look at the wrong people instantly in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
That's my take. How about you?
Well, I think when I was thinking about winners, I think that there are two major definitions. I work with guys all the time who they're at a place. Usually, you know, they're in their 40s, maybe into their 50s, and they're really starting to hit this
stride.
I'm not happy.
Oh, okay.
Well, because now they kind of see the trajectory that they're on.
Which is generally at the age of a man or a woman, but starts to hit that stride where they're all these years before.
Yeah.
They're coming into their own in their business or their career, and you're saying that they're at this point where they realize, wait a minute.
Yeah, they're starting to get, I guess what I should say is they're starting to get some of what they're reaping what they sowed.
Okay.
And so they're starting to get that, and there starts to become this realization of an emptiness of it.
Is this all there is?
Yeah, so they were starting to win, with the money, and that's in the 40s and 50s,
Gotcha.
where we start to hit this and see, hey, yeah, I'm pretty good at this. And then all of a sudden you start to realize that, they're coming to me because, I don't know, like it's just not what it was cracked up to be, or a lot of times is resulting in marital problems, going outside of the marriage. In other words, they're on a chase.
They're looking for that thrill.
Something
They're looking
else.
for that thing that's going to satisfy that itch.
Maybe I just need to get this.
Yeah, if I just had.
You use the phrase, well, what's enough?
Yeah, just a little bit more.
Just a little bit more. And so
Rockefeller said.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the failed definitions of winners. And I think you young guys out there, I don't know how to tell you, I'd love for you to just listen and learn from listening. But I think sometimes you got to learn by doing.
Yeah.
So, I guess what I'd say is we're planting a seed. If you're out there chasing the car or the woman or the money or whatever, and that's a big thing on your mind, and how do I know that? Well, that's what we think about. That's where we put our time in on those kinds of things. I want to plant the seed that I will tell you at some point in time, you're going to be coming up empty because the car does rust. The woman does get older.
Yeah.
The money just gets spent away on things. So it's just these things that you and I have both realized that a simple life is really, really
a godly
important.
Life, whether that be simple or whatever, but a godly life. This is going to sound strange. I had a conversation with somebody this week who's extremely talented. I don't know how he does what he does, but I had given him a caution, and this is not a blanket statement against churches, but I said, you need to take care of your family first.
Yeah.
That is the first thing. And I said, I've lived long enough. I've seen a lot of people who were in churches every time the door opened, and they were the shakers and movers in churches, and they had messed up kids. And I said, it does no good in God's eyes. And, you can chase a lot of things, even what we determine, what nobody would fault anybody for.
Yeah.
You're chasing something or you're doing something maybe to an extreme, and you're sacrificing your greatest calling.
Yeah.
Really. And that's to raise godly children, have a good home, have, these things. If you're married, have, to take care of your wife and be, these kinds of things. So it doesn't really matter what it is. It can be chasing worldly things. It can be chasing what you think are godly things.
Yeah.
You've got to take care of these things first if you're going to be a winner in my book.
So if we're chasing things that build us primarily, in other words, our ego, our self-esteem,
strokes, gets us the accolades, all those things.
And I go to that because you talk about the church thing. Lynn and I had that conversation. There's nobody that worked harder in the church. Maybe your Linda and my Linda. They worked extremely hard in the church. And this is, Lynn and I have had the conversation. And at one point in time, our kids said, I think Mom's married to the church.
Yeah.
And we had to have that conversation that she got so many pats on the back.
Yeah.
So many, man, you're awesome. You're great.
Yeah.
That it just felt so good to be there for her to keep doing more and more and more.
If you're one of those people, because I was one of those people as a volunteer in the mid 2000s.
Yep.
And I learned when you throw your hand up, and I'm not here to bash the church, but it's just true in anything. If you throw your hand up, more comes. If you're a mover and a shaker and you're able to get things done, you will accumulate even more. There'll be a far greater ask at every turn. You've got to get a rein on that.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a winner, the first place is in your home.
Yep. And that's a great place to leave that right there. Yeah. Your home, your relationship with God. So anyway, I think hopefully, guys, in defining that winner idea is where we wanted to plant the seed, because what we're going to talk about now is, okay, so then how do I make sure I don't go down the Debbie Downer roads? How do I move out of that and not self-sabotage myself? So with that being said, I think one thing right off the bat is to take your thoughts captive. We are called to do that. To when you hear that, I could never pull this off, I don't have the background.
Well, that's Satan.
I don't have the degree. Yeah,
that's Satan talking to you.
And I'm just rehearsing it too, right? I put fuel on it. So that idea that you actually call it out. And you can call it out not just by verbally saying, no, I'm not going to believe it, but most of the time you can actually factually fact check the lie that you're telling yourself. Like the reason why your boss called you out is because he saw your pedigree of performance already.
You had a history.
Yeah, you had a history. You had a pattern of performance. And he called you out on that. Like, no, you've got what it takes. So he called out the irrational thought.
And I think I said on this show, in my early years, if my mind had been a horse, I'd have shot it, because it just would take off. I had no control over it. It would just run wild. And I learned a technique called thought stopping. Have you heard of that? Yeah. So if you don't know what that is, you say in your mind when these thoughts go, because I had a lot of anxiety issues. I know you had the same problem. It's on the locomotive is at full steam and it's running, and you say in your mind, just say stop it, and if you persist, you're screaming in your mind, and if that doesn't work, yell it out loud. Real quick, as a side note, I was going to work one morning, had an especially bad morning with the thoughts running, and I had a convertible, I still have it, a Mustang, and I'm sitting at an intersection up in Mason. And I finally had enough, and I screamed out loud, "Stop it!" And I'm exasperated. And then I look up, and there's a guy with an igloo cooler standing there waiting for his ride, and he's looking in the car like I'm talking to him. So I got a good laugh out of that.
Did he stop walking?
I think he went away. But you can have some fun at some point. I laughed at myself, but I literally would do that. I mean, I'd have to do that to try to break the cycle.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, in everyday life, though, when it's not as fever pitch, we just tend to go along with it. It just kind of it's back there running the background like a software program.
Yeah. Almost white noise.
White noise. Yeah.
I just to the stop it idea. So I have gone to the idea of not just stop it, but stop it with the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
In the name of the Holy Spirit, stop it.
God help me.
Invoke the power of the Spirit, and if we truly believe in the spiritual world and in the power of that, then if it's just me trying to stop it, it's just going to stop for 30 seconds and I'm going to go right back to it. So I really want to invoke the power of the Holy Spirit. No, in the name of the Holy Spirit, I am done with this thought.
I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. His favorite passages, I know a good friend of ours, Steve McMullen, he carried this around. He read this passage for years, and he told me about it, that he, in his difficult times, he read Philippians 4, I hope I could say his name on here, Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, think about these things. It's a calling out to us to take our thoughts captive and try to steer away from the negative. Yes, prepare for the future, but turn it over to God and try to focus on. And this is not. I don't want to come across holier than thou, because my wife will tell you I struggle. I was raised in a way that was completely different. Real quick, I'll say, when I first met my wife, she said that she and her sisters didn't argue, and I said, somebody's eating a lot of crow. That's how I believed. That's how I thought the world was, everybody lived, and it turns out they have a relationship like I didn't know.
Yeah.
They don't have the conflict. They don't see, So it's been, it's been a real process for me to undo a lot that I brought into adulthood.
With that being said, like some of this negative thinking pattern and our behaviors, they are habitual. and they become part of the lifestyle. And so that's why if you hear this today and you go, yeah, you don't understand, like this is how my life's been. Listening to this show is probably not going to be, okay, I'm good from this day forward, but it is the start of us starting a new practice. And I think that's the intentional part. Like every day I'm going to get up and I am going to read some scripture. Or every day I'm going to ask how somebody else is doing. And I'm going to add a little bit of, seasoning in their life. So it's that kind of stuff. Your wife has helped rebuild you in some ways.
Well, I did a lot of work. I don't think she's definitely been a big part of it. I did it, and I'm going to say, did a lot of counseling early on. You got to do the heavy lifting in your life. If you identify that there's an area of your life that's messed up, you got two choices. You can either limp along for the rest of your life, or you can take it on, head on. And it is one of the toughest things you'll ever do for some of these issues, at least for me, that you'll have to address. But if you want to live vitally, that's the best choice. Now I want to say this Pygmalion effect, I think, really emphasizes the importance of being an encourager, of seeing the best. And this is about strong dads and seeing in your children these aspects and trying to play to their strengths more. A father can really either build up or crush a child. Yeah, more so than the general public will. And I'm not knocking my dad, but my dad used to say, "Why aren't you more like such and such?" The class valedictorian, and that started at a young age. So that plants a seed. Yeah, you have in your hands when you have children, you have a clay that you can mold into just about anything. Yeah, and your encouraging words and your expectations not that they're too high. But I can't stress that enough. Back to being a winner is raising up confident children that you're not damaging by putting unrealistic expectations on them.
Yeah, and helping define, I believe, a proper definition of winning, as we tried to do here just a little bit ago, because the world is going to try to get your kids to be defined by a different definition of winner. How many trophies did you get from the swim meet? How many,
all the commercials that are putting,
So helping our kids with that, I think, is critical. So another thing I think is important is who we surround ourselves with.
Yeah.
We get this in the counseling world all the time. A lady has not been very easy to live with. She's, because I'm limited in my vocabulary, she's bitchy, and
you're limiting your vocabulary?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I could say.
I can't imagine where that would have gone.
So, and she's tough to live with, and you as a guy, you've been with it for a while here. You've been living this, and then you go and you start talking a little bit at work, and you happen to surround yourself with guys that challenge you towards the negative. Yeah. You know what? If that were my wife, this is what I would do. I wouldn't put up with that for a second. And so they just help take you down that negative road. So I think it's real important that you recognize, now, is that the right kind of people or counsel that I want to hang around?
Guys that stand around and bash their wives, I don't have really any patience for. I guess I'm fortunate. I married a great woman. From that standpoint, but I do think you make the wife that you want in some ways. The guys that stand around the water cooler and just lament about their wives, I find it tragic, and I don't really participate in that. I don't like to say things about my wife that I wouldn't want her saying about me. Yeah, from that standpoint. So if you get into those crowds,
Yeah. So surround yourself with the right people. On that line, there's who we aspire to be. This is always a danger with when we have young kids, and I'm thinking really boys, but it could be boys or girls, and they just really get wrapped up in the sports figures. Yeah. And the next thing you know, Peyton Manning or whoever it is right there next to God. Yeah. Yeah. And so,
or bigger because they're more relatable. They're visible. You can see them. They're real.
Yeah. You could get an autograph and everything else. And so I think, who we aspire to be. And even, Carl, moving outside of sports, like a lot of times we're told, and I probably have said this too before, that if you want to be a certain person, find that person who's doing whatever it is that you want to do and start modeling their life. Right. Do what they do. Right.
Do what they do.
And there's truth to a lot of that. But that we better be careful, because there's one person we should aspire to be.
Right.
And I think it's important to say we all need to understand the aspiring to Christ. It should be the goal.
Right.
Right. And so.
And this goes back to this conversation I said I had with this young man. There's been a lot of people come down the pipe over my lifetime that were out there doing things that everybody was admiring and everything like that. If you had just taken just a cursory look at their family, you would instantly realize there's something that's not matching up here.
Yeah.
There's something not matching up. To more and more today, and I had this conversation. I didn't have children of my own, so it may not be as valid for me to say this, but because I know the challenges of being a father as far as raising children from the time they're born. But I said these we were talking about a couple individuals. I said, you really need to just stand back and look at their family life, and that should tell you something. That should tell you, and quite often we just kind of ignore that. We look at the one characteristic or the one thing that they're doing. I put a lot of value on that.
Yeah,
I just put a lot of value on that.
Yeah, when you find the CEO who's making all the money, and then you find out that his family's a mess, you can go, well, okay, maybe that's not who I want to aspire to be.
He may be, and again, he may be great at that. I don't mean to take anything away from it, but in the end, I'm a big Ecclesiastes fan. In the end, it all goes in the ground. It all goes back, and it all gets to your investment in your children, if you have children, is the only real chance you have at immortality.
Yeah,
I mean
the next generation.
And even then, 2 or 3 generations out, you're gonna be forgotten for the most part. But the residue, I mean, Greg here recently did a sermon on going back to the gentleman way back in the 1800s, and you look at the lineage that came forward from that person who was a criminal and everything.
That was the negative side.
Oh my! And then there was the positive side. Was it? I can't remember the other guy's name.
The guy who finally broke it.
No, it was the other. He's a big one. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he was a famous person, and his lineage, how they were different. You see that. That's your legacy. That's what matters.
Yeah,
is what's going to follow you. From that standpoint. So anyway, we could probably talk about it. You got a list of things.
Well,
here,
I've got some things. So once you really start reprogramming your brain as to what a winner is and what you're going to aspire to be as Christ is, then I think it really does get down to some nuts and bolts type things. And so here are some of these nuts and bolts. One is just the whole idea of start to have a growth mindset. So the growth mindset is the idea of you're the problem solver. You are going to look at mistakes and errors as the opportunity to learn versus, I guess we're done. We're dead in the water. But the growth mindset is, well, that didn't work. Maybe I can try it this way.
Yeah. Back up, regroup, try again.
Yeah. So
you got down here the goal oriented. One of the things that for a long time for me, the goals were way too far out in the future, and you have a general idea where you want to be. Like when we teach financial peace, what you're looking for is to develop enough retirement to sustain you and things like that. But I do find that today, more and more, I look at it and say, if you can craft a great day inside a framework of what you ultimately want. So if you want to have financial freedom, but you're out spending buku dollars on stuff that doesn't really matter, that's not in the framework. But if you focus on a great day and do enough of those, you develop the masterpiece that you're looking to paint.
Yeah.
And that's where I break the goals down to a livable thing instead of something so far out.
Yeah.
Does this fit within my long-term goal, and how do I manifest that today?
Yeah, I refer to that like when I'm working with people. I'm right with you. I think we're taught to set goals, and I speak about, okay, now we reverse engineer it.
Yeah.
So we go out 5 years or 20 years or whatever we're going to go out, which, by the way, I'm not real big on going way out.
No, not way out. It's too nebulous.
But maybe we go out 5 years or whatever, and then they'll cut it in half. Where do you want to be in 2.5 years? Where do you want to be in a year? Where do you want to be in 6 months? So bring it back to the daily. Okay, so each day that means I'm going to have to go up. I'm going to have to get up, and I got to run 2 miles. Oh, okay, yeah. If that's what we have to do each day.
Today. Not some big goal out in the, and that's why people, well, I'm going to lose 50 pounds or something, and it's out there somewhere. Well, then that means today. You know, it's not something. It becomes more personal, more active. It's more doable when it's in the day.
Yeah.
Dale Carnegie used to say, as far as worry and things, live in day-tight compartments.
Yeah.
And try to maintain this day.
Yeah.
Focus on this day, what you can do, what you don't want to do, and things like that, and then forget about what happened and everything, all those other things, if best you can. So
one of the things I have in here is resilience. I think the idea of I always have thought, like, I never want to do away with sports, and I know there's so many other ways, but I think for a lot of us, sports, they don't lie. The scoreboard doesn't lie.
No, that's why we value it so much.
Yeah, everybody gets a chance to get their teeth kicked in, right? Yeah. We've all had a loss, right? Yeah. Like when you think about a batting average, a good batting average is 300. That means, 2/3 of the time you lose. So
Babe Ruth had the biggest strikeout too.
Yeah, and so I just think that idea, like not being defined by the mishaps and the temporary losses, and being able to shake it off and live another day, that resilience to keep on going back. I think that's really important.
And this is a confession. I wish I had back just 1/3 of the time I spent in regret, sorrow, immobility, following something I felt was tragic or emotionally shattering or a failure. One of the key factors that I've seen with successful people is that window from the event to the next action is small.
Yeah.
And I've gotten caught up too many times where I've gone out into the wilderness and just licked my wounds. I've been a crybaby. I've been, just weak. I hate to say it that way, and caught up in myself. And that there is no benefit in that. I really don't think for 90% of the time that we do that, you're just digging your own hole. And like we say, if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging.
Yeah.
That. I don't know how I don't know the psychology behind that as far as how to shorten that, but most of the times it's pride. Most of the times it's expectations that you had that maybe were unreasonable or whatever it is, demanding more out of people or circumstances than you should.
Yeah.
But the shorter that can be, the quicker you can say, that didn't work out so well, or that hurt, and get up. That is a big factor from people I've studied that it's short. It's short.
Carl, how do you do that? Well, I think that is also a very intentional thing. You can't, grieving is a natural process. It is a natural process, just like rotting fruit is a natural process. But we can do certain things to rot faster, right?
That's an interesting analogy.
Well, and so that grieving, you feel like you're just rotting, right? Like you're just, I'm not who I was, and I'm falling apart. And so that idea here is, no, I can't do this. I'm going to give myself a time. And I learned, I think I knew this, but I had a client once, it's been several years back. He lost his job. He was a power player, okay? Power player, leader in this company. And there was some shifting going on in the company. He wasn't quite aware of what was going on. He goes in one day and they call him in. And I mean, he's a power player. He's big money. Okay.
He's the dude, one of them.
Yeah. And they called him in and they said, today's your last day. You're not coming back. No warning at all.
Not any idea that things were wrong.
Nothing.
Or bad.
No. And he was blown away. He got in his car. He looked at the steering wheel and he said, I'm giving myself 1 week.
Wow.
To cry. And after that, I'm picking it up. And Carl, I'm telling you, that's exactly what he did, because I started working with him about 2 weeks in, and he was already on fire. Like, no, like, and I'm over there going, no, you can feel bad, right?
Just process this. You're in denial now.
Yeah.
It's like,
but he was so good. He's like, no,
wow.
because he said I had every reason to feel sorry for myself,
Be mad.
where I was going to get my money and all of these different things. And he said, I got 1 week. He defined it so well. And I think we can do that, actually. We can do that.
Wow.
We can say, because even though your mind might trickle back into that, feel sorry for me thought, that's when the stop thinking starts coming. No, I said I only get a week, or I only said I only get this much time. I think you have to be very active in moving through that and getting back on the track. But that was a lesson for me. And he did, by the way. He came back, rebuilt, came back in and used his gifts to get back. Yeah. Well, stronger because the humility it made him like a whole different character.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
If I can look back at my life, there's been eras of years where in one way or another, it stayed with me and has held me back from re-engaging or doing things and things like that. I can't imagine. That is, if I could give somebody a gift, if I knew they were like me, it would be that ability.
Yeah.
Because that will, the inverse of that, and I said this just the other day to another person, I said, that stole life from my years. It didn't take years off my life necessarily, but it stole life
the quality
from my
of
years.
Yeah.
That's a key, man, that resilience thing. If you can do that. And I think maybe a big part of it is being aware that people do it.
Yeah.
We tend to think this is what the normal thing is when we're going through that. At least I did. Everybody kind of, no, they don't know. There's a difference. You can choose differently. I wish I had.
Yeah.
I hope you do.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's run down on time here just a little bit, just so we don't go too long. Let's see. I want to go through. I'm going to go to the next one. Even the continuous learning. I would say that of the people I know, you are one of my favorite continuous learners. You're always digging.
I dig a lot.
You are always digging.
Always turning things. It's not always good.
Well, but you're not afraid to dig. I think I'm a relatively quick learner to a shallow degree, right? Like once I know what I feel like I need to know, I'm ready to move on. And you will just dig and dig and dig.
I call it, every so often I put all of it back on the altar. There's no sacred cows. Every so often, if I feel I'd have to, I will rethink a major idea. And it takes a good deal of work. So usually it comes after just, I've got one right now. Well, actually, I've got two that I'm working on that would be, if I turned them loose in most church groups, it's probably because they're blasphemous, but I think it's important to continually search. You know, God says, knock and it shall be opened, seek and you shall find. I don't think that means we stop the moment we accept Christ. There's a truth. There is a deeper and deeper truth. That's the beauty of the Bible. There's a deeper and deeper truth always waiting to be discovered. I think that you have a responsibility to continue to seek, and you will find. And sometimes the answers are difficult to incorporate. But continuous learning is important in any field.
Yeah. You got one there that sticks out to you?
Obviously, I've said this before, effective communication. I think it's so important. Our words are powerful to hurt or to help. Even when we think, I always wonder what babies think about. I know this sounds goofy, but I think I have a theory about it. But when a baby dreams and you see him like laughing, people like say it's gas. I go, you think about, there's something about words, and it talks about in the beginning there was the Word, and God spoke things into existence. Spoke, and words are so important. And I said in an earlier show, the only common factor among the CEOs they studied was that they had a strong command of the English language to becoming an effective communicator. I think more than anything, too, when it comes to change and things like that, especially how we affect those around us, the power that you have, I've always said people underestimate the power of a smile and being an encourager. I can't tell you how many people are walking around who need encouragement. Being an effective communicator in that, if you were nothing else, would have a huge impact on the world. You will not see how far that goes.
Yeah. I'm going to ride on the coattails of that with the importance of emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And emotional intelligence, if you said that phrase 30 years ago, I mean, it would have been like, what are you even talking about? But I think understanding first who you are emotionally, how you're wired. I think that's where we miss the boat a lot of times. Like when we do parenting classes, I spend the first hour and a half talking about, before you do any of this parenting thing, you better know what kind of emotions you're bringing in, because the emotions are dictating how you're going to parent. And if you're mad and you're parenting out of that anger and madness, that's going to look a certain way, right? And so I think you taking the time to say, how am I wired? How do I handle my own emotions? And then starting to read that well in other people, because then you can start to see the better part of yourself. You can start to see others. You can read people so much better. And so that's that communication, but also at a deeper level, like what are they communicating and what am I communicating without the word? Right. So I think that emotional part is important for us.
Yeah. Did I say it in here, what I said earlier before we started? You were born an original, don't die cheap.
Oh, yeah.
Did I say that here?
No.
Okay, so it was a saying I heard years ago, you were born an original, don't die a cheap imitation of someone else. When we boil all this down, we saw it said earlier, the best that you can be is what God intended you to be and is calling you to be. I think for a lot of people, it's important to get away and sort out your life. It's at least to sit and think, why do you believe the things that you believe?
Yep.
Why do you, if you walk into a room, why do you think that most of those people in there are probably looking to take advantage of you, or they're liars, or or whatever? Why that way, as opposed to, oh, it's so good to be around these people, or it's so good to be involved in this, or I can't wait to, where do these thoughts come from? And what is it that God's calling you to do? If you strip away all the advertising, all the things that maybe your parents thrust on you that they thought that they saw in you, but really they were seeing what they wanted to see.
Yeah.
Strip all that away. The biggest things for change that you can affect in your life is to more fully move toward what God intended you to be.
Yeah.
And all these things are tools to help you get there. But the biggest thing is question some of these things that you have in your mind that you just let run free. Why do I believe that?
Yeah.
Why?
Everyone, whether they've called it out or not, has to live by a philosophy.
Yep.
And
a paradigm.
And so those are your values. Like whether you've written them down, whether you've called them out, in your mind, you have a sense of how you're going to operate, how you're going to treat people, what things you're going to do, what things you're not going to do. But I think it's really important to define that more clearly, to get rid of the wiggle room. In other words, like, well, I'm wishy-washy on it. No, like define it. I mean, we talk about that in marriage. We talk about that with raising kids, your family philosophy, right? Sometimes I talk about like you can't really start a country. This country is successful in so many ways because it started with a constitution of sorts, right? Like, well, what are we going to stand for? What are we going to believe in? You've got to do that for yourself. You have one, but you need to get that thing locked down in concrete. Like, I don't waver on these things. These are the important values. So.
Right, and that's part of that emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is about why you believe the way you believe, why you see the world way. I think I said maybe on one of our previous, Father Martin did what's called Chalk Talk years ago. I saw it 35 years ago. We held up the magazine, and I was telling you about how on one side there was he said, what do you see to the crowd? And it was a war scene with, actually there were bodies in the debris, and it was horrific. And people were yelling out, carnage, war, death, and all this stuff. Isn't it funny? I see flowers and fields and sunshine and everything. Turned the magazine around, and it was what was on the back was an ad.
Yeah.
And he said, aren't we basically looking at the same thing, but just from a different perspective? And yeah, you'd think that's kind of trickery and everything, but there's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot of truth in what goggles you put on in the morning. I have been on both sides of the goggle side. I've had a terrible view of life, of people, and things like that. And it took a long time to overcome that, to trust and things like that. But that emotional intelligence is key.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're going to wrap it up. So, our discussion today is really about you creating the vision for where you want to be in your life, how you want to operate and function. And of course, we're saying, it's of great value to pursue Christ. So that's where we want to be. But then, that stinking thinking. You like to use that stinking thinking, that bad vision, that self-sabotage. If that's a pattern in your life, then, this show hopefully shook you a little bit, because you have a lot more control over those patterns than maybe you're giving yourself credit for. But you've just kind of allowed yourself to fall victim. So hopefully you're called out on that. Hopefully you start to make some changes.
I want to say one thing that haunts me in the Bible, just for food of thought. When Job is informed of what has happened to all of his children and everything like that, there's a line there that haunts me. He falls to his knees and he says, "That which I feared has come to pass." And I've often wondered, is that one of those things where Satan especially knew when God says go out and do this, why did Satan choose what he chose? Mm-hmm. And you look at Job saying, "That which I have dwelled on, that which I have lived in fear of, is the very thing that was used to attack me."
Yeah.
So that's a big statement just to think about. At least I think it is.
Yeah.
So,
guys, hopefully good stuff for you. We want to thank our sponsors again. We want to thank Quality Auto Mart, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and 4Speed on 50. I don't know when you're going to listen to this show, but we're going to drop it in the holiday season, end of the year, beginning of the year. So we wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year coming up. So the New Year is always a good time to reset things. We should do the whole show on resolutions, right? Because
failed resolutions. We could do a lot.
Well, you do week 1 and then you do week 2. Yeah,
that one made it 2 days.
Yeah. So guys, go out there and be a strong dad. Strong Dads wants to thank Quality Auto Mart and Service for being a proud sponsor of the Strong Dads podcast. Started in 1985 and going strong for all these years. Recently, Quality Auto Mart has transitioned from owners of Mark and Nancy Repke to longtime employee Fred and Lorene Venus. For all your automotive needs and golf cart needs, check out Quality Auto Mart, located across from Indian Lakes on Highway 46 outside of Batesville, Indiana. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.